I didn't hear the click of that metal safe so much as I felt it. Sharp, cold, slicing right through the quiet of that office like it had been waiting for this moment longer than any of us wanted to admit. The lawyer's hand paused on the dial, and for a breath it felt like time nudged me forward, whispering that nothing would be the same once that door swung open. Folks say truth walks slow but shows up loud. That afternoon, it marched straight into the room wearing steel hinges and a dusty handle. I sat there, hands trembling just a little, wondering how long my child had been planning whatever storm was about to hit me. My pulse tapped against my ribs, soft at first, then faster, like it wanted to warn me. The air smelled faintly like old paper and polished wood, that strange mix that always made me think of secrets no one wanted to claim. I swallowed, feeling something heavy rise in my chest, and as the lawyer leaned forward again, a hush fell over everything, thick enough to taste. If you're still here with me, tell me what city you're watching from. Every comment you leave feels like another step we take together in this story. And if this one touched your heart, tap the like button so more people can hear it too. Before I go on, sugar, let me introduce myself real quick. Folks call me Grandma Nell, a 72-year-old woman with a heart full of stories and a life that taught me more lessons than any classroom ever could. Now let's step right back into that room. My daughter sat across from me, her chin lifted just enough to look confident, but not enough to hide the tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth. I caught it the way only a mama can catch the things her child doesn't want the world to see. I'd raised her, held her through fevers, dried her tears after high school heartbreaks, packed her lunchboxes with little notes telling her she mattered. And yet, sitting there across from me, she looked like a stranger wearing my baby's face. A small sigh slipped out of me, quiet, shaky, while she pretended not to notice. The lawyer cleared his throat, not loud, just enough to remind us he was still part of this tangled moment. The latch on the safe finally gave way, letting out a soft groan like something inside had been waiting for its freedom. I watched dust lift into the air, swirling in the sunlight like tiny ghosts. My daughter's fingers tapped against her knee, a fast, nervous rhythm that made my skin prickle. I whispered an "oh" under my breath, barely audible, but emotion has a way of escaping even when we try to cage it. Earlier that morning, she'd walked into my kitchen with a boldness that didn't belong to her. She'd stood near my table, the scent of fresh coffee drifting around us, and announced that she had taken care of the inheritance. Just like that, like she'd rearranged the furniture or dropped off a package. My breath caught and I asked her what she meant, my voice softer than the storm she was stirring. She smiled, tight-lipped, said all the documents were already updated, that I didn't need to stress myself at my age. Something inside me quivered. Not anger yet, just confusion and a little crack of fear. The lawyer had called me shortly after she left. His voice carried a tension I felt all the way in my bones. "Ma'am," he'd said slowly, "I think you should come in today." "Bring your daughter?" The weight of those words clung to me the whole ride over, and every mile felt like a question I didn't want answered. Now here we were, watching that safe open. My daughter shifted in her chair, her smile thin as fishing line, stretched too tight to be real. "We don't need to drag this out," she murmured, waving her hand like she could sweep the whole truth under a rug. "Everything is already handled." The lawyer didn't look at her, he looked at me, and the look he gave held more sorrow than surprise. He reached into the safe with steady fingers and pulled out a thick stack of envelopes, each one sealed, each one marked with dates I recognized. My handwriting, my signatures, my private notes, all preserved exactly how I had tucked them away. My breath shivered in my chest, a soft awe slipping out before I could stop it. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not from weakness, but from the sting of realizing how far my own child had gone. The lawyer placed the documents gently on the table, the sound barely a whisper but loud enough to slice through whatever facade my daughter had been holding. Her face paled, her lips parted. A flicker of something panic maybe flashed through her expression before she smoothed it over. "These," the lawyer said quietly, "are the original documents, untampered, fully valid." My daughter froze. He wasn't done. He reached beside the stack and slid out a second folder, thin, crisp, too clean. That one didn't come from the safe. That one, he said, had arrived recently. These, he continued, are the versions presented under your daughter's name. A trembling sound caught in my throat, not weeping, more like something inside me trying to find its footing. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had edged closer without making a noise. My daughter's jaw clenched, her fingers still, her eyes darting toward the door as if planning an escape. And in that moment, I saw it all. The forged signatures, the lies told with a steady voice, the betrayal wrapped in a smile. But the lawyer wasn't finished. He pulled out one more thing from the safe, a single, folded sheet I recognized instantly. My heart thudded. My daughter's breath hitched, and the quiet in the room deepened, settling heavy over all of us. He unfolded the page slowly, and right there, everything began to unravel. The lawyer held that unfolded page like it carried the weight of every unspoken truth, and the air tightened around us as if the room itself leaned in to listen. I could feel a warm ripple rising up my neck, something between dread and a quiet determination I hadn't known I still possessed. My daughter stared at the document with wide, tense eyes, her breath short, her confidence slipping like sand through open fingers. In that moment, I sensed the story had shifted, and whatever she thought she controlled was sliding beyond her reach. I remember leaning slightly forward, drawn by a strange pull, almost like the universe nudging me toward a revelation. The edges of the paper fluttered when the lawyer exhaled, soft yet loaded, and he looked between us with a caution that made my pulse thrum. A faint sound escaped me, more of a hush of disbelief, because seeing my handwriting there felt like meeting a version of myself I had tucked away for safekeeping. My daughter's shoulders tightened as though bracing against a storm she had created with her own choices. The lawyer placed the sheet on the polished surface, tapping one corner gently. "This," he said in a low, careful tone, "is the instruction letter your mother signed a decade ago." The words floated in the quiet, heavy and deliberate. I blinked slowly, memories tugging at my chest. That letter had been written during a time when life felt fragile, when I believed preparing for the future meant protecting my child from uncertainty. I never imagined it would become a mirror reflecting betrayal. My daughter let out a sharp breath, almost a scoff, but it trembled. "That doesn't change anything," she muttered, her voice strained. She shifted her gaze away, trying to mask the worry gathering across her brow. That nervous flick at the edge of her mouth returned, and I felt an ache spread through me, the kind that comes from realizing love had been twisted into something unrecognizable. I sighed, a soft, weary release that carried 1,000 layered memories of raising her, guiding her, believing in her goodness. The lawyer remained steady. "Actually," he replied gently, "it changes everything." His tone held empathy, but beneath it lived a firmness that couldn't be ignored. He slid the genuine document closer to me, the crisp paper whispering across the table. My fingers hovered above it before I touched the edge, feeling the familiar texture of ink and old intentions. My daughter's eyes followed my movements with a mixture of fear and something sharper, maybe regret or resentment. I couldn't tell. The office felt colder somehow, shadows stretching longer against the walls as if echoing the stretch of tension between us. I swallowed, tasting a metallic bitterness that came from disappointment more than shock. "Why?" I whispered, directing my question toward her, though I wasn't sure she would offer anything real. My voice quivered slightly, not from weakness but from the rawness of understanding the depth of her actions. She opened her mouth, closed it, then lifted her chin. "You weren't handling things," she insisted, but the wobble in her tone betrayed her. I thought it was time for me to take over." Her words stumbled over themselves like they were searching for justification and landing in excuses. I shook my head slowly, feeling a soft "oh" rise from my chest, a sound weighted with sorrow. The lawyer, sensing the fragile cliff we stood on, paused before speaking again. "Your mother was handling everything legally and responsibly," he said. "The forged documents you submitted were flagged because the signatures didn't match formal records." His voice was calm but edged with truth sharp enough to slice through denial. My daughter flinched. A flush crept up her neck, rosy and uneven. The silence that followed wrapped itself around us, thick as wool. I felt a pang deep inside, not anger exactly, but a profound grief for what had been broken. Trust doesn't shatter with noise, it cracks quietly, leaving echoes that last far longer. The lawyer continued, laying out each fact with the precision of someone who understood the gravity of family unraveling in front of him. The estate remains fully under your mother's authority, he said. Every original instruction, every legal appointment, every future decision, she retains complete control. My daughter's knees shifted inward, her hands tightening in her lap. So that's it, she murmured, voice fragile like it might crumble. Her gaze darted to mine, and for the briefest moment, I glimpsed the little girl who once ran to me after nightmares, who believed I was safety itself. That vision flickered before vanishing behind the hardened woman she'd become. I leaned back slightly, allowing my breath to settle into a slow rhythm. My heart felt heavy, but beneath the ache lived a small ember of resolve. I never wanted things to reach this point, I said softly. I wanted honesty, respect, a bit of care. My voice tightened, but I kept it steady. Not deception. A faint sound, almost like a wince, escaped her. I watched her blink rapidly, trying to hold herself together. The office lights hummed faintly above us, adding an odd stillness to the scene. I glanced at the lawyer, who nodded gently, reassuring me with his quiet support. He gathered the forged papers, stacking them neatly, the rustle loud in the hush. These will need to be addressed formally, he explained, but for now, the priority is clarity. He then tapped the authentic documents. And clarity is right here. My daughter's breath hitched. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered, barely audible. The tremor in her voice tugged at my heart, stirring confusion and sorrow together until they felt indistinguishable. I felt a small whimper catch in my throat, the sound slipping out before I could stop it. I know, I replied quietly. But you did. The room dimmed as a cloud drifted past the window, and the shifting light cast shadows that looked like dividing lines across the floor. For a moment, none of us spoke. I could hear my heartbeat, slow and deliberate, reminding me I was still here, still standing, even as my world tilted. A sudden rustle shattered the stillness, the kind of sound that makes every nerve in your body jump before your mind even understands why. My daughter jerked upright, her chair scraping the floor with a long, uneasy scrape that sent a quiver down my spine. I felt a soft gasp slip out of me, uninvited but honest, as she pressed her palms flat against the table like she needed something solid to keep her steady. The room had already been thick with tension, but now it felt like the air itself trembled. The lawyer paused mid-gesture, his fingertips resting lightly on the documents. His eyes shifted to me, gentle but alert, as though he feared the next few minutes might unravel something fragile inside this family. My breath shivered as I straightened my back, reminding myself that dignity was something I could still hold on to, even here, even now. My daughter swallowed hard, her throat making a faint clicking sound. I didn't do all this out of greed, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to, I don't know, make things easier. The words wavered like they were ashamed to exist. I watched her closely, a dull ache swelling in my chest. A small O escaped me, a mixture of sadness and disbelief. Easier for who? I asked gently. For me. Or for you? She blinked fast, her lashes fluttering like she was trying to chase away unwanted truths. Her fingers trembled as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You're getting older, she muttered, the tone thin and uneven. Things get confusing. I thought taking over meant protecting us both. The sting of those words cut deeper than I expected. Maybe it wasn't what she meant, but the implications settled heavy in my bones. I leaned forward a little, my hands clasped in my lap, feeling a soft awe rise in my throat. Baby, I murmured, getting older doesn't mean I vanished. I'm still right here, still able. Still clear. She dropped her gaze to the polished surface, tracing a faint line with her thumb. A shaky breath slipped through her lips, almost a sigh but thinner. The lawyer remained silent, giving space for the unraveling to unfold naturally, like a wound that needed air before healing. The shadows on the wall drifted as the afternoon light shifted, stretching long across the office floor. I watched the shapes move, slow and soft, and something inside me loosened, something I'd been holding too tightly since the moment she stood in my kitchen earlier that day. I drew in a long breath, letting it settle deep in my chest, a small release humming at the back of my throat. "When did you first think about changing everything?" I asked. My voice was calm, but beneath the surface lived a quiet tremor of emotion. "Tell me the truth." She hesitated, lifting her eyes only halfway. "A few months ago," she whispered. "I saw the papers in the drawer. I thought if something happened to you, I'd be stuck trying to figure everything out alone. And I panicked." I felt my heart sink a little, not because she was scared, but because she faced her fear by stepping over me instead of walking beside me. A soft slipped from my lips, the kind that comes when disappointment sits deeper than anger ever could. "You should have come to me," I said slowly. "I would have listened. I would have answered every question. I would have made space for you." My voice cracked slightly, a trembling almost like a quiet plea. "Why didn't you trust me enough to ask?" Her chin wobbled. She pressed her lips tightly together, trying to hold back whatever emotion threatened to spill. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. Because I thought you'd say no." That sentence sliced through me, not because of the content, but because of the belief behind it, my own child thinking I'd shut her out completely. I felt a sudden warm sting behind my eyes, blinking it away with a trembling exhale. "Saying no," I whispered, "isn't the same as shutting you out." Her breath shuddered. "I know," she murmured. "I messed this up." The lawyer shifted slightly, clearing his throat in a soft, respectful way that didn't interrupt. He placed the authentic papers neatly in front of me, aligning them with quiet precision. "Mrs. Nell," he said gently, "these documents confirm your full legal authority. We can restore everything exactly as intended." My daughter's shoulders dropped sharply, almost like a silent collapse. She looked small suddenly, smaller than I'd seen her in many years. A faint sound, not quite a cry, not quite a sigh, fell from her lips, raw and trembling. She covered her face with her hands for a moment, her breath uneven. I felt something fragile pull at my heart. Love doesn't evaporate, even when trust cracks. I reached out, touching the edge of the table with my fingertips, fighting the urge to gather her into my arms the way I did when she was young. But things were different now. This moment required truth before comfort. Slowly, she lowered her hands, eyes rimmed with wetness. "Are you going to hate me for this?" she asked suddenly, her voice trembling like a thin wire ready to snap. The question hit me with a force I didn't expect. A deep, aching hum slipped out of me. "Hate you?" I echoed softly. "No, sweetheart, but I hurt, and hurt takes time." A tear rolled down her cheek, glistening in the fading light. She brushed it away quickly, almost embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really am." The lawyer gave us space, folding his hands neatly. The quiet stretched, gentle but charged, like the room waited for the next shift in our story. I inhaled slow, drawing strength from somewhere deep. "We're going to face the truth," I said, "even if it shakes us." My daughter nodded, wiping her cheek. "Okay," she whispered. And just as the lawyer reached for another document, something unexpected happened. Something that changed the tone of the entire room. I started part 4 with a soft sigh caught somewhere between disbelief and the ache that sits behind your ribs when you finally understand something wasn't just broken. It was intentionally shattered. After the lawyer stepped out to take that call, leaving me alone with that open safe and the mess that tumbled out of it, I stayed there on the floor longer than I probably should have. My knees complained, my back begged for mercy, but I couldn't look away from those papers, those neatly folded betrayals, arranged like tiny landmines just waiting for me to touch them. Now, before I tell you exactly what I found next, let me take you back for a breath, just one, so you understand why that moment knocked the wind out of me. Years ago, when my late husband Thomas first brought up the idea of a family safety net, he'd spoken about it with pride. He wanted our son to grow up knowing stability was something you built with intention, with discipline, with sacrifice. But somewhere between the dreams we built and the reality we lived, that intention got twisted into something else. Something secret, something ugly, something that wasn't meant for the light. And honey, when light finally touches something that's been kept in the dark too long, It never looks the same again. I reached for the next envelope, this one thicker, sealed with a little gold sticker like it was something precious. But the minute I tore it open, that sweetness evaporated. Inside was a contract. A full-blown agreement with notarized signatures, my son's on one line, my daughter-in-law's on the next. And right beneath that, in bold letters that made my pulse throb inside my ears, were the words, "Transfer of authority." Authority over what? Everything. My accounts, my properties, my medical decisions. All drafted months ago, just waiting for my signature. Except I'd never seen it before that moment. My hands shook so badly I had to set the papers down before I tore them by accident or maybe out of anger. "Lord have mercy," I whispered, though I'm not sure if it was a prayer or a warning. At the bottom of that contract were little sticky notes in my daughter-in-law's handwriting. Brief instructions. Have her sign this after lunch. Make sure she's relaxed that day. Mention the doctor's recommendation again. My breath hitched. After lunch, like I was an appointment, a task. A chore to be completed between grocery shopping and scrolling through her phone. I pressed my hand to my chest because the hurt bloomed fast and wide, like someone had punched the air right out of me. Now here's something you need to understand. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers so sweetly, so softly for so long that you start believing it's love. The lawyer came back in then, apologizing for the interruption, but the moment he saw my face, he stopped cold. "Mrs. Nell," he said gently, "you don't have to keep going right now." But I had to. Because once you've already seen the roots rotting under the soil, you can't pretend the tree is healthy anymore. I showed him the contract. He didn't look surprised, not even a little. And that told me something I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. He'd suspected something like this. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough to worry. "Do you want me to explain what they were attempting here?" he asked. I nodded because my voice was trapped somewhere under all that disbelief. He went through every line slowly, carefully, breaking down what would have happened if they'd got me to sign. I would have had no access to my own money, no rights to sell my own property, no control over my own healthcare decisions. My entire life, every choice, every dollar, every breath of independence would have sat in their hands like a puppet waiting for strings. Every word sliced deeper, but it was the last thing he said that felt like a slap. "They were planning to move you into an assisted living facility within the year." My throat burned. Assisted living me. After I'd raised my son, helped him through college, made sure he had everything he needed to step into adulthood without stumbling the way I had. After I'd welcomed his wife in with open arms, cooked for her, prayed for her, defended her even when her sharp tone stung. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, trying to steady myself, but the room felt tilted, like the world had shifted an inch to the left. "They can't do that," I whispered. "Not without your signature," he said. "And now that we've found this, they never will." The strength in his voice steadied me. I inhaled slow, letting that truth settle into the cracks of my broken trust. But then he placed another envelope in my lap, one he'd found tucked behind a box of old receipts. "This might be the most important one," he said softly. Inside was a handwritten letter, not from my daughter-in-law, not from my son, from Thomas. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. His handwriting was rough, slanted, rushed, like he'd written it knowing time was slipping through his fingers. And as I unfolded that letter, I felt the years fall away, like I was sitting beside him again, listening to him tell me things too big for saying out loud. I started to read. And with every sentence, the truth unraveled deeper, revealing something he'd tried to protect me from long before I ever guessed there was danger in my own home. What Thomas wrote changed everything. Not just how I saw my son. Not just how I saw my daughter-in-law. It changed how I saw myself. Because suddenly the betrayal wasn't the only story. There was power buried in that safe too. Power Thomas meant for me to find. And Lord help me, I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me ever again. I stood there silently. I eased myself back into that leather chair like it was the only thing still holding me up, Thomas's letter trembling in my hands. Even before I finished reading the first line, I felt something shift deep in my chest, like a door I didn't know existed had finally creaked open. His handwriting looked rushed, jagged in places, like he'd written it during one of those nights he couldn't sleep and didn't want to wake me. But the words, oh, the words carried the weight of a man who knew the storm was coming long before I ever felt the wind. Nell, he wrote, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect you the way I wanted. So I'm giving you the tools to protect yourself. I stopped right there, pressing the page against my heart because that one sentence alone told me he'd seen something he never said out loud. Something he kept tucked behind those tired smiles and quiet evenings when he'd stare off at nothing like he was listening to a thought that wouldn't speak clearly. The lawyer sat across from me, waiting, not saying a word. He must have sensed I needed a moment because he folded his hands and just breathed with me in that still room. Finally, I kept reading. Thomas talked about the accounts he'd hidden not from me, but for me. He explained how his instincts had sharpened as he got older, how he'd started noticing things in our son that reminded him of his own brother. That took me by surprise because Thomas never talked about that man unless he was forced to. But now it made sense. His brother had swindled their mother out of her savings, leaving her nearly broke in her last years. Thomas never forgave him for it, and he never forgot what greed looked like when it wore the face of family. I didn't want to believe our boy carried that same spark, he wrote, but every year it grew brighter. I hoped marriage would soften him, I hoped fatherhood would humble him, but I saw the opposite. My throat tightened. I had always chalked our son's sharp edges up to stress, to the pressure of adulthood, to the way the world can rub a person down until they forget how to be gentle. But Thomas had been watching differently, watching with the memory of betrayal carved into his bones. He went on to mention my daughter-in-law. He said she wasn't the root, but she watered the wrong seeds in him. A person can only grow where their company allows, he wrote, and she nurtures ambition without conscience. I let the letter fall into my lap for a moment as a soft, stunned "oh" escaped me, not anger, not even surprise. Just a sad little exhale from a woman who finally understood the shape of the shadow following her family. When I picked the letter back up, Thomas explained the structure he set in place. The assets hidden in the trust. The instructions meant only for me, the safety net he didn't want anyone else touching, and then the hardest part, his warning. If he comes for you, Nell, it won't look like violence, it'll look like help. I shivered. Because that was exactly how my son had been approaching me lately, offering to help pay my bills, offering to handle my doctor's appointments, offering to simplify things so I wouldn't have to worry. Help that felt too polished, too rehearsed, too expectant. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. Thomas told me years ago to open that safe with you if anything ever felt wrong. He trusted you'd know when the time came. My eyes stung. I blinked fast, trying not to let the tears fall because I wasn't done reading yet. The last page was shorter, only a few lines, but they cut deeper than anything that came before. Don't let love blind you to danger. And don't let fear stop you from claiming what's yours. You're stronger than you think, Nell. Use what I left you. Stand firm, and don't ever let them make you small. When I finished, the room felt heavier but clearer, like fog had finally lifted and revealed the sharp shape of the mountain in front of me. I folded the letter slowly, treating it like the sacred thing it was, and slipped it back into its envelope. I breathed in deep. All right, I whispered. Let's finish going through the safe. The lawyer nodded, and together we sifted through the documents, the statements, the passwords Thomas left behind. Every page painted a fuller picture. My husband had prepared for this. He hadn't been caught off guard by our son's intentions. He'd seen the slope years before it turned into a cliff. But here's the thing that stuck with me most. Thomas didn't leave me a map because he expected me to fail. He left me a blueprint because he believed I'd know how to build something solid out of the wreckage. Halfway through the next stack of papers, I found a small velvet pouch. Inside was a key, thin, old, made of brass with a tiny number engraved into it. "What's this for?" I asked. The lawyer's eyebrows lifted. "That is the key to a safety deposit box." My heart skipped. Another layer, another step Thomas planned. Another truth waiting to be found. "Do you want to go today?" he asked. I looked toward the window, the sunlight slicing across the wooden floor like a quiet invitation. And right then, something inside me steadied, not anger, not fear. Resolve. "Yes," I said. "Today I'm done being in the dark." And for the first time since this whole mess began, I felt Thomas beside me, not in memory, but in purpose. He'd left me the tools. Now it was my turn to use them. I rose from the chair with a slow breath, feeling courage gather in my spine as the future finally opened before me like a doorway. I didn't expect the day to feel so still as we drove across town, yet everything outside the car window seemed frozen in a quiet I couldn't touch. The lawyer handled the wheel with the same calm he'd shown in his office, but my thoughts rattled like loose coins inside a jar. I kept rubbing my fingers together, this tiny nervous habit I'd picked up years ago but hadn't done in ages. That alone told me how deeply this moment cut. Every mile toward that bank felt like another thread snapping inside a web I didn't know I'd been trapped in. When we finally reached the brick building with the heavy glass doors, I hesitated before stepping out. Something about the air tasted metallic, not dangerous, just significant. I breathed in gently, then let out a soft, shaky sound, almost like a murmur slipping out before I could stop it. The lawyer walked beside me without pushing, his presence steady but unobtrusive, like someone carrying a lantern just far enough ahead to keep the path visible. Inside, the bank smelled like polish and old paper. A faint echo followed our footsteps as we approached the counter. The teller glanced at the key in my hand, her expression tightening with recognition. "This way, ma'am," she said, leading us to a narrow hallway painted in muted beige. At the far end stood a thick steel door with a dial lock and hinges that looked older than I was. She opened the vault with practiced movements, the metal groaning deeply as if the room itself had something to confess. Rows of boxes lined the walls, each one holding a piece of someone's secrets, someone's past, someone's fear. My heart thudded when the teller stopped at a mid-level drawer and nodded for me to step forward. "This is the one assigned to that number," she said. I slid the brass key into the lock. My hand shook once, just enough for the metal to click against the edge before steadying. The key turned smoother than I expected, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. When the lid finally lifted, I felt something warm gather behind my eyes. Not tears, no, that kind of softness takes time to surface. This was something sharper, a mixture of realization and relief I never expected to feel in a single breath. Inside the box sat a bundle wrapped in cloth. Not fancy, not delicate, just practical fabric tied with a thin ribbon. It reminded me of how Thomas used to store things he didn't want misplaced. Beneath it lay an envelope with my name written in that familiar hand, the letters curved in a way that made my chest quiver. I picked up the envelope first. "Nell," it began, "if you're standing here, you've already seen enough to know why this matters." I swallowed, letting the words settle before reading the rest. "I wanted to spare you from the kind of hurt my mother carried to her grave. She trusted her own child, and he used her trust like rope to pull her into ruin. I couldn't let that happen to you. Not you." A soft sound escaped me, half sigh, half hum, heavy with grief and gratitude woven together. The lawyer stepped back, giving me space while still staying close enough to catch me if the floor decided to tilt. Thomas wrote about investments he'd made without telling anyone, accounts he'd opened under a structure designed to protect rather than hide. He'd predicted there would come a day when I'd need evidence, something solid enough to drown out any lies my son or his wife might throw at me. Then he mentioned the cloth bundle. Inside, he said, I would find what he considered the true core of our family's financial history, documents proving origin, ownership, and intention. Not just numbers, but lineage. Records that would outlive any forged paper or rushed scheme. "And if he ever tries to use the law against you," he wrote, "show them these. They'll speak louder than anything he can invent." When I finished the letter, my fingers trembled as I reached into the box and lifted the bundle. The fabric felt worn, almost soft, like something handled many times with care. I untied the ribbon slowly, then unwrapped the layers. The first item was a thin ledger, the pages yellowed but orderly. The handwriting inside belonged to Thomas's father, neat strokes documenting property handed down through generations. Houses, fields, even a small share of land near the river I never knew existed. Next came property deeds, each folded neatly, each bearing names from decades before mine ever entered the picture. Then came the photographs. I pulled them out carefully. Images of Thomas's grandparents standing in front of their first house. Pictures of children holding hands near a garden so lush it looked unreal. Documents matching these images with dates and signatures that stretched back almost a century. I felt a soft "oh" slip out, the kind of sound that came from deep memory even if the moment wasn't mine. This wasn't just wealth. This was legacy. A history my husband protected because he feared the wrong hands would twist it into something ugly. My son, he had no idea any of this existed. He'd only seen what was visible at the surface and assumed he could claw his way into it. But these papers, this history, was something he couldn't fake, couldn't access, couldn't manipulate. As I sifted through each file, a slow burn began to replace my earlier trembling. Not anger. No, anger is quick and reckless. What rose inside me was steadier, a kind of quiet power. A certainty that whatever storm waited at home, I wasn't walking into it empty-handed. The lawyer finally spoke, his voice low. "Mrs. Nell, with these documents, no one can challenge your ownership. Not legally, not ethically." I nodded, a faint warm wave rising in my chest. "I see that now." He hesitated before adding, "Your husband thought very far ahead." A little breath slipped out of me, part relief, part sorrow, part something hard to name. "He always did," I whispered. We gathered everything carefully, placing the bundle and the letter back inside the box for a moment before transferring them into the lawyer's briefcase. As we walked back through the hallway, I felt lighter, though not in a carefree way. More like the kind of lightness that comes when someone finally sets down a burden they didn't realize they'd been carrying. Stepping out into the sunlight again, I paused, letting the warmth touch my face. A sudden hush pressed against me, gentle but firm. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt ready, not hopeful, not fearless, but ready. Because now I finally knew the truth. My husband hadn't just protected me, he'd empowered me, and I was going to use every last piece of what he left. There's a certain weight a person carries after learning something powerful, something that shifts the ground under their feet. As the lawyer and I stepped back into the parking lot, I felt that weight settle over my shoulders like a shawl I'd worn before, only now it wrapped differently. Firmer, warmer. There was a hum inside my chest, low and steady, like an engine turning over before the road ahead. I didn't rush into the car. I stood still for a breath, letting the sunlight linger across my hands as if it needed to remind me I hadn't lost myself in all this. The lawyer paused beside the trunk. "We'll drive back to my office," he said, calm as always. "It'll be easier to sort through everything there." I nodded, touching the edge of the briefcase he held. The leather was cool under my fingers, and it made something inside me flicker. Not fear, anticipation. A gentle kind of anticipation that carried its own quiet strength. "All right," I murmured, my voice softer than I expected. Once we were in the car, the ride back felt different than the one to the bank. I wasn't clutching my hands or running on nerves. Instead, I watched the world move beside me, the trees swaying lazily, the houses lined up like old friends waiting on porches. With each passing block, I felt a warm pressure building behind my ribs, like a sigh I hadn't let out in years. The lawyer glanced over once, only once, and I caught it. Not pity, understanding. I didn't say anything, but I let out a tiny hum, almost like a small me slipping out without thought. Sometimes those little sounds feel like pieces of truth falling out of us. And in that quiet car, it felt safe to release them. By the time we pulled up to his office again, my heart had settled into a slow, steady rhythm. Something inside me knew this was just the beginning of the real unraveling. The forged documents, my daughter's voice saying she'd already taken care of the inheritance. The lawyer's face stiffening when he first saw the signatures. We walked inside, and the familiar scent of old books greeted me again, comforting, grounding. The lawyer placed the briefcase on the long wooden table, clicked open the latches, and began carefully laying out the contents from the vault: the letter, the ledger, the photographs, the deeds. Each one landed with a soft whisper against the wood. Then he reached for the folder containing the forged papers my daughter had filed. "I want to show you something," he said. He opened the folder and placed 2 pages side by side. On the left, my actual signature on a property transfer from 10 years ago. On the right, the signature she submitted last week. The difference was so clear it almost stung. My real signature leaned slightly forward, always had. The forged one sat stiff, like it didn't know how to breathe. I let out a low, aching "oh," the kind that presses against the chest before it slips out. "She wasn't even close," the lawyer murmured. "Not legally, not stylistically." I stared at both pages, the truth pushing through me slowly, thickly. Betrayal doesn't crash in like a wave, it seeps, it settles, it spreads. My daughter had taken my trust I'd built over decades of late-night talks, scraped knees, whispered lullabies, and bent it until it broke. A little tremor fluttered beneath my ribs, but I steadied it with a breath. I wasn't the fragile woman she thought I'd be, not anymore. "What happens next?" I asked. The lawyer lifted a single sheet of paper from the forged set. "These were filed to assert control of your estate. If they'd gone through, she would have had access to everything: accounts, properties, decisions." He tapped the folder. "But now that we have the originals, plus the generational deeds from the vault, plus your husband's letter, her claim becomes impossible to defend." He paused. "But I need to know something before we move forward." I looked at him, waiting. "Do you want to challenge the documents directly?" he asked. "Or would you prefer to confront her first?" A warm hush fell over the room. My heart tightened, not in pain, but in deep contemplation. The idea of confronting my daughter left a strange stinging behind my eyes. Mothers aren't built for war against their own children. But sometimes the battlefield comes to you anyway. I pressed my palm gently against the table, feeling the grain of the wood beneath my fingertips. A soft breath rolled out of me, almost like a tired hum, quiet but certain. "I want the truth laid out," I said slowly, "but I want her to see what she's done with her own eyes." The lawyer nodded. "Then we prepare." He spent the next few minutes explaining how we'd present the documents, how the meeting would go, how she wouldn't be able to argue once everything was placed in front of her. As he spoke, I felt something stir low in my chest, strength maybe, or resolve. They feel similar on days like this. When he finished, he gently pushed a stack toward me. "These are copies," he said. "Keep them safe." I touched the top sheet and felt a faint tremble travel through my hand. Not fear. No, it was the weight of generations, legacy, the truth my husband hid away to protect me. I gathered the papers carefully, and as I slid them into my bag, I felt something shift inside me. A new steadiness. A quiet fire. Then, just as I clasped the bag shut, a memory flickered through me: my daughter at 16, her eyes full of something fierce and bright. She used to run to me when she was scared. She used to trust me with everything. That girl felt a million miles away from the woman who forged my name. A soft, almost trembling "mem" slipped out as I closed my eyes for half a second. The past and present pressed against each other, and the space between them ached. But when I opened my eyes again, they were clear. The lawyer stood. "We can arrange the meeting for tomorrow," he said, "if you're ready." I rose slowly, letting my breath settle into a steady rhythm. "I'm ready," I whispered, "more than she'll ever expect." As we walked out of the office together, the evening air greeted us with a tender breeze. The sky held that dusky glow between day and night, the kind that always felt like a bridge from one truth to another. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a quiet certainty pulsing through me. My daughter thought she'd taken everything, but she had no idea what I'd just reclaimed. She had no idea who I was becoming. A soft tapping sound woke me before the sun had fully settled into the sky, the kind of early morning noise that makes your heart stir before your mind wakes up. For a moment, I lay still, staring at the faint strip of light slipping through the curtains. It felt like the world was whispering something to me, nudging me gently toward the day I'd been walking toward since the first forged paper showed up in that lawyer's office. A tiny breath slid out of me, warm and shaky, almost like a quiet hum asking if I was really ready. I sat up slowly, my fingers brushing the edge of the blanket. It was still early enough that the house held a soft hush, the kind that settles over a home long before coffee starts brewing. As I placed my feet on the cool floor, a small tremor ran through me, not fear, not anymore, but something thoughtful. I stood and let the stillness steady me. The mirror near the dresser caught my reflection and I paused. There I was, older than I once was, older than I ever expected to feel, but there was a strength in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Maybe ever. My husband would have recognized it, though. He always said there was a steel thread inside me woven through the softness. I guess it took betrayal to find out if that was true. I let out a low exhale, almost like a soft sigh that carried weight instead of weariness. Then I began getting ready. Every movement felt intentional. I picked a dress that made me feel steady, not flashy, not timid, just grounded. Then I added a small pair of pearl earrings Thomas had given me years ago. When I fastened them, something warm flickered near the back of my throat, like the tiniest O of memory surfacing gently. By the time I reached the kitchen, the sky outside had turned a pale blue, and the world seemed to be waking with me. I poured a little water, took a sip, and sat for a moment at the table. Today wasn't going to be about shouting or anger or dramatic gestures. Today was about truth, truth steady as a heartbeat. My phone buzzed quietly against the table, breaking the silence. A message from the lawyer. Arriving in 20 minutes. I nodded to myself, even though no one was there to see it. The sound of that message didn't make my stomach twist like it had the first time he called. Instead, it felt like a step, a necessary one. When he pulled into the driveway, I met him at the door. "Morning," he said, his voice calm, steady, reassuring in that gentle way of his. "Morning," I replied, my voice a little firmer than I expected. "Ready?" A soft slipped out as I nodded. "As I'll ever be." The ride to the meeting place, a small, neutral office space he'd rented for the confrontation, felt wrapped in a silence that wasn't heavy but purposeful. The lawyer didn't fill it with unnecessary words, and I didn't feel the need to break it. Sometimes silence is the strongest companion you can bring into a room where truth is waiting. When we arrived, I felt something inside me shift. My heart tightened once, then steadied. I stepped out of the car, the air warm against my face. The building wasn't intimidating, just plain brick, a single door, a narrow window. But inside, everything was waiting. My daughter, her lies, my truth. As we walked inside, I spotted her car already parked out front. That made a soft, nearly silent hum slip from my lips, more reaction than thought. She was early. She wanted something, control maybe, or she simply wanted to look prepared. My daughter always liked arriving first when she had something to prove. The lawyer guided me down a hallway and paused at a light gray door. "She's already in there," he said quietly. "We'll go in together." I felt a small flutter beneath my ribs, but it wasn't fear. It was something older, maternal, painful, and familiar. The ache of loving someone who's lost their way. He opened the door. There she was. My daughter sat on the far side of a long table, her back straight, her jaw tight, her eyes shifting sharply toward us the instant we walked in. She looked collected, too collected. The kind of calm people wear when they think they've already won. My breath caught for half a second, not because I was afraid, but because seeing her face, that face I'd kissed 1,000 times when she was small, tugged at something tender inside me. I felt a tiny sound escape my throat, something like a soft awe of memory scraping against the truth of where we stood now. "Mom," she said, clipped and flat. "Good morning," I answered, keeping my voice warm but steady. The lawyer took a seat beside me, placing the briefcase gently on the table. My daughter's eyes flicked to it, then back to my face. Her expression tightened. "What's all this?" she asked. Her tone carried a thin attempt at nonchalance, but something in her voice trembled, barely perceptible, but enough. Enough to tell me she knew. She knew something had shifted. Something had slipped out of her grasp. The lawyer didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened the briefcase with quiet, deliberate movements and began laying out the neatly organized stacks of documents. The original deeds, The ledger, the photographs, and finally, the letter. My daughter's face paled just slightly, not enough for most people to notice, but I saw it. I knew every nuance of her expressions. I'd read her face the way some people read books. "What is that?" she demanded. The lawyer looked at her calmly. "These are the original documents for Mrs. Nell's estate, all verified, all authenticated, all protected." She stiffened, jaw locking. He continued, his voice even. "Which means the documents you submitted last week are not just invalid." Her eyes widened. "They're fraudulent." The word sat between us like a stone dropped into water. She opened her mouth quickly. "That's a lie." Mom, I told you I handled everything. You said you trusted me." Her voice wavered on that last word, and something inside me cracked just a little. I felt a warm ache move through my chest, something like a soft rising and falling quietly. "I trusted you," I said, voice gentle but unshaken. "But trust doesn't mean surrendering the truth." She stared at me, confusion flashing before panic crept in behind her eyes. "This isn't real," she muttered. "It can't be." The lawyer slid the original documents toward her. "It is." She reached for one quickly, scanning it with trembling fingers. Her breath hitched, her shoulders jerked once. And in that moment, watching her eyes dart across the page, watching the truth sink in like slow rain, I felt both heartbreak and a strange, quiet relief. It was time she finally faced what she'd done. It was time the truth spoke louder than her lies. I should have noticed the air shifting before anyone said a word. You ever feel something tighten around you, quiet but heavy, like the room itself knows a truth you haven't heard yet? That's exactly how it felt the moment I stepped closer to that table. A faint tremble rolled through my chest, soft enough to mistake for nerves, but deep enough to warn me that nothing happening in that office was as simple as my daughter wanted it to be. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there, listening to the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. It's strange how loud silence becomes when somebody in the room is hiding something. And Lord, I could practically taste the secret clinging to the air like dust. My daughter shifted her stance, brushing imaginary lint off her sleeve. Her smile, thin and sharp at the edges, didn't reach her eyes. She gave a tiny exhale, almost like she was trying to steady herself. I caught it, though she pretended not to notice I'd seen. Something inside me whispered, "Steady now, old girl, this moment is about to turn." The lawyer cleared his throat politely, his gaze darting between us. "Before we continue," he said, "I want to remind both of you that this portion of the meeting involves private disclosures." His tone held that polite firmness professionals use when they're trying not to stir trouble. My daughter's fingers tapped against the edge of the polished desk. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm too quick, too nervous, too telling. She murmured a soft sigh. It slipped out faster than she could stop it, then drew herself upright like she was preparing for battle. I folded my arms lightly, not defensive, just anchored. I wasn't afraid of anything in that room, though my heart gave a weary flutter. For a moment, I wondered how we reached this point. How did a child I held against my chest, humming little lullabies into her hair, become someone who forged papers behind my back? The thought hit me like a cold ripple, leaving a sharp ache behind my ribs. But I couldn't fall apart. Not here. "Go on," I told the lawyer gently. "Let's hear it." He nodded once, then pulled a sealed envelope from the safe's top compartment. It wasn't the pouch my daughter had been staring at. This one was older, yellowed slightly at the corners, sealed with wax she clearly didn't expect to see. My daughter's face twitched barely, but enough. Her lips parted, then pressed shut again. "You didn't mention that," she said, trying to sound casual, but a small quiver slipped into her tone. "I wasn't required to," the lawyer replied calmly, "and its presence is intentional." My pulse thudded at the word intentional. I leaned in slightly. "What exactly is in there?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed the envelope gently on the table. He touched the seal like it carried weight, reverence, even warning. "This," he said, "contains instructions written long before any recent documents surfaced. Instructions that clarify your estate's control, safeguards, and your intended beneficiaries." My daughter swallowed hard. A nearly silent "ah" slipped from her before she caught herself. Her hand curled into a half fist against her thigh. "You told me you trusted me to handle those things," she muttered, almost under her breath, as if trying to rewrite history while it was still unfolding. I glanced at her, not angry, just deeply tired. "I trusted you to talk to me," I said softly, "not replace my choices." Something flickered behind her eyes, annoyance, maybe fear, but she didn't respond. She just looked away, jaw tightening. The lawyer reached for a silver letter opener. The scrape of metal against wax echoed through the room, low and foreboding. As he sliced the seal open, the tension around us thickened, like the air had been soaked in anticipation. Before he unfolded the papers, he looked at me one more time. "What's written here may change the course of the discussion entirely." My daughter's breath hitched. She let out a little strained exhale, like a balloon losing air. I steadied myself. "Read it," he began. "To be opened only in the presence of my child and myself." My daughter shifted again, nervous, squirming, her fingers trembling despite the way she tried to hide them. A tiny, frustrated sound caught in her throat, almost like a quiet groan she couldn't silence fast enough. "Should there ever be a dispute or confusion regarding the authority over my affairs, I declare the following. Full control remains solely with me until my passing or until I willingly sign over that right with a notarized hand signature and a recorded statement." The lawyer looked up. "This is legally binding." My daughter's shoulders jerked. "That doesn't mean anything," she snapped, but her voice cracked near the end. "Oh, it means plenty," he replied, still calm. "Especially considering the documents you brought earlier lacked a matching signature." A warm, stunned hush washed over the room. My daughter let out a thin, shaky laugh, the kind you use when your excuses start falling apart. "Maybe you mixed something up," she said quickly. "There was no mix-up," he said. "Your mother's handwriting is archived in our system. The signatures you presented didn't match." Her face drained. I swear, for a second she looked like a child caught with crumbs on her cheeks after stealing cookies from the jar. Her eyes darted toward me, then away, then back again, desperate to find some angle she could still twist. I didn't speak. I couldn't, not yet. My chest felt tight, but not from shock anymore. This was something else. Something heavier and strangely steadier. My spirit felt like it was rising out of the fog, getting clearer by the second. "Please continue," I whispered. The lawyer resumed reading. "My child may help me but never replace me. Any attempt to override my wishes without direct consent shall be considered a violation of trust and referred to legal counsel immediately." My daughter let out a tiny gasp, barely audible. She rubbed her palms together nervously, whispering something under her breath that sounded like a trembling, frustrated "oh no." The lawyer gently set the letter down. "We can stop here if you wish," he said to me. But I shook my head, lifting my chin. "No, we're going to finish every piece of this." Because at that moment, right there in that silent, charged room, I felt something powerful settle inside me. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. And Lord knows, once clarity arrives, the storm that follows never misses its mark. A quiet crackling feeling rolled up my arms before anyone said a thing. You know, that electric moment right before lightning hits. That's exactly what the room felt like. Every breath carried a charge. Every heartbeat echoed louder than it should have. And deep inside, something whispered that the next words spoken in that office were going to change everything. The lawyer set the old letter aside with careful hands, as if it were made of glass. My daughter stood rigid across from me, her jaw tight, her breathing shallow, her eyes darting between the safe and the papers already on the table. A faint murmured slipped out of her, almost too soft to catch, but it trembled through the air like a warning. I eased myself into the chair, keeping my voice steady. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." But Lord, my heart gave a long pull, stretching between pain and resolve. The lawyer reached back into the safe, pulling out a dark leather folder. My daughter froze. Her mouth parted slightly, her shoulders tensing. She didn't know what was inside that folder, she just knew it didn't belong to her. "This," the lawyer said in a low tone, "is the original estate file. The trustworthy one? My daughter let out a soft huff under her breath. She tried to mask it with a crooked smile, but the strain sat heavy on her face. I don't understand why we're digging up old files, she said, forcing casual confidence. The updated documents already settled everything. He answered with a firm, almost gentle tone. That's exactly what we're determining today. Her fingers curled around the arm of her chair, knuckles whitening. I felt a stir inside me, a mix of sorrow and disbelief. There was a time I would have given anything, anything, to shield her from consequences, from harm, from even a sharp word. But now, watching her fidget and tremble, watching the truth spread cracks across her calm facade, I realized something had broken long before we stepped into this office. And it wasn't the law, it was us. The lawyer opened the file. A faint rustle filled the room, soft but sharp enough to cut through the heavy silence. Page after page slid beneath his fingers until he stopped at one document in particular, a familiar document. One I remembered signing with my own pen, the one that protected my decisions, my home, my savings, my legacy. Mrs. Harper, the lawyer said, his voice calm, this is the authentic power of authority statement you signed 5 years ago. My daughter's breath stumbled. She whispered a tiny oh no that barely slipped past her lips. I reached for the paper slowly, steadying my hand as I scanned the neat handwriting. My own signature flowed across the bottom, the ink faded but unmistakable. It was like looking at an older version of myself, hopeful, cautious, and determined. My daughter stared at it, eyes wide, throat bobbing as she swallowed hard. That's not the one I saw, she blurted suddenly. The lawyer didn't flinch. I know, she blinked. What do you mean, you know? He folded his hands neatly over the file. Because the one you brought earlier was not a match. Her face flushed, her words stumbling over each other. Are you saying I brought something fake? That's ridiculous. Why would I do that? I flinched, not visibly, but deep inside, like a small crack running across the surface of my heart. Why would she? The lawyer's calm expression softened with sympathy. I'm saying the discrepancies were obvious enough to raise concern. My daughter pressed her palms to her temples, whispering a shaky sigh, almost like a tired exhale slipping out before she could stop it. I spoke quietly, but my words landed heavy between us. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? She didn't look at me, not at first. She kept her gaze on the floor, her breathing uneven. Then slowly she lifted her eyes. The hurt in her stare stung me, not because she looked guilty, but because she looked angry I'd caught her. I was trying to help, she said through clenched teeth. That's not help, I replied softly. Help doesn't hide. Help doesn't forge. Her chin trembled barely. You never trusted me with anything. I felt something warm rush behind my eyes, not tears yet, just the sting of old wounds being pressed too hard. I trusted you with my life, I whispered, but I never asked you to take control of it. For a moment, something in her expression wavered, just a flicker, quick, fragile, gone too fast to save. Like seeing the child she used to be peek through a cracked door before slamming it shut again. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. There is another item in the safe. Her head jerked up. Another, he stood, reached into the deepest compartment and pulled out a small, flat metal box. The kind meant for the most private of documents. My breath caught involuntarily, almost like a hushed "oh" washed through me, soft but sharp. The key clicked, the lid opened. Inside lay a single folded note resting atop a sealed envelope. My daughter leaned forward, eyes widening again. What is that?" The lawyer lifted the note. "This," he said, "is your mother's personal instruction for scenarios involving misuse, deception, or unauthorized actions." Her body went stiff. "Misuse, deception, that isn't fair." He opened the note. My pulse fluttered like a startled bird. He began reading aloud. "If someone I love ever tries to override my choices without consent, let this record stand as the truth. My trust is precious. My clarity is sacred. And any attempt to manipulate my intentions should be met with full correction for the sake of peace and fairness." My daughter gasped, loud this time, a forced inhale that hit the room like a stone thrown into still water. She stammered, This isn't right. You're both twisting everything. I didn't do anything wrong." The lawyer looked at me, then back at her. We haven't made any accusations, he said. The documents speak for themselves. Her eyes darted around the room, wild and searching, as if she could find a crack in the wall to slip through. I leaned forward, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to slice through her frantic breathing. Everything you tried to hide, I told her softly, is coming into the light now. The room felt like it swallowed that sentence whole, and for the first time she couldn't outrun the truth. A quiet truth settled over me like a heavy shawl, warm in its honesty, but weighted with everything it revealed. As I sat there across from my daughter, I felt a strange stillness inside, the kind that comes after you finally stop pretending a wound doesn't hurt. I didn't speak right away. I didn't need to. Some moments demand silence first, the kind that lets everyone feel what's really happening. My daughter wouldn't look at me. Her jaw stayed tight, her gaze fixed on the edge of the desk as if it might magically shield her from reality. A shaky sound slipped from her lips, almost an unintended whimper, and she swallowed hard, trying to gather herself. The lawyer rested the note back in the metal box and gently closed the lid. There's still more, he said quietly, but before I continue, I need clarity. My daughter let out a snappy breath. Clarity for what? For intent. Her shoulders flinched barely. Intent? You're making it sound like I committed a crime. His voice remained even. Forged signatures are a serious matter. A low, panicked rumble came out of her, almost like a growling sigh caught halfway in her throat. She shook her head fast, eyes wide. I didn't forge anything. You're twisting everything, both of you. I placed my hands slowly on the table, fingers trembling just a little. Look at me, she hesitated. For the first time that day, real hesitation, not anger dressed up as confidence. Her eyes flicked to mine, glazed with confusion, fear, frustration, so many emotions tangled into a single messy knot. What did you expect to happen? I asked softly. For me to sit quietly and sign whatever you wanted? She pressed her palms flat against the desk. I expected you to trust me. A bitter sting rose in my chest, warm and sharp. Sweetheart, trust doesn't mean surrendering my life to you. Her eyes flickered with something unsteady. Hurt? Shame? Or was it just that same restless anger looking for a target? She whispered. I was scared. The room went still again. Even the air seemed to pause. I leaned in. Scared of what? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. She looked away. A soft, cracked slipped from her throat, almost like she tripped over the emotion sitting there. The lawyer waited patiently, hands folded. If you'd like to explain, this is the time, he said. She rubbed her temple, shaking her head. It wasn't supposed to go this far, I thought. She broke off with a harsh exhale. I thought if I had control, I could protect everything, make sure nothing was wasted. Wasted? The word struck me hard enough that my breath caught. I almost said something sharp, something that would have sliced through her excuses, but I held it back. I didn't want to cut her, I wanted to understand her. You think I would waste my own life's work? I asked. Her throat bobbed. I didn't mean it like that. But you did, I whispered. Her lips parted, but no defense came. The lawyer reached into the folder again, pulling out another sheet. This is the comparison record, he said. It outlines the inconsistencies between the original and the document she presented. My daughter's hand darted out fast. You don't have to show her that. His tone stayed kind. She has a right to see, dear. She shook her head wildly. No, she doesn't need. I raised my hand gently, stopping her words. Let him show me? He laid the pages side by side. The ink on her copy was darker, newer. The signature on mine had a slight upward curl at the end, a curl missing from hers. My stomach didn't drop, my chest didn't tighten. Instead, a quiet ache spread through me, slow and steady. My baby girl had traced over my name, not once, not twice. Several times. The lawyer didn't say anything. He didn't need to. My daughter let out a trembling sound, sharp and desperate. I wasn't trying to hurt you, I just thought this was the only way to make sure everything stayed in the family. I closed my eyes for a moment. A soft "oh" slipped from my lips, more of a wounded sigh than surprise. Everything is in the family, I said, but that doesn't give you the right to overtake me while I'm still alive." Her expression cracked just a little, but enough. "You don't understand. I needed security. I needed to know I'd be okay. And you think I wouldn't help you?" My voice quivered. "You think I'd leave you out?" She blinked rapidly, a few tears threatening the edges of her eyes. "You've always been so strong. I didn't think you'd ever slow down. I didn't know how to ask." A strange tenderness stirred inside me. It didn't erase the betrayal, not even close, but it reminded me that things this painful usually have roots deeper than what we see. The lawyer cleared his throat softly. "There's one last document," he said. My daughter tensed again. "Another one?" He nodded. "A legal directive added a year ago." He pulled it from the metal box. It was in my handwriting. I remembered writing it during a quiet afternoon while sitting at my kitchen table. Back when I felt a tug in my spirit, an instinct that someday I might need to protect myself, even from someone I loved. The lawyer unfolded it with care. My daughter's breathing became erratic. "Please don't, just don't," he read. "If anyone attempts to interfere with my choices without consent, I request full legal restoration of my authority. My decisions are my own for as long as I am in my right mind. I expect the law to honor the life I built with these hands." She flinched like the words slapped her. I whispered, "I never wanted to use that paper. I hoped I'd never need it." She let out a sharp sniffle, wiping her face roughly. "So that's it, you're punishing me?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm setting us straight." She sniffed again, softer this time, like a child trying not to cry. The lawyer placed the directive on top of the others. "This means your mother retains full authority. Everything reverts to her original decisions." My daughter slumped back, a weak, wounded groan slipping out of her as if the air had been punched from her lungs. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just felt the weight of truth settling between us, heavy, humbling, necessary. And nothing about it felt victorious. The room felt colder than before, sharp enough that I could feel the chill brushing against my skin, crawling up my arms like a slow whisper. The scent of old paper floated through the air, mixed with the faint polish of the wooden desk. Every small sound, the shift of a chair, the soft creak of the floor beneath us, the rustle of a page, seemed louder, heavier, as if the whole world leaned in to listen to what came next. My daughter wiped her face with the back of her hand, letting out a shaky little huh as if she couldn't believe the day was turning on her like this. I could feel her confusion rippling through the space between us. It made my breath tighten, not from judgment, but from the ache of seeing someone you raised stumble so far from truth. The lawyer placed the directive down gently. "We're moving forward based on the original legal instructions," he said. "This isn't punishment, this is clarity." My daughter let out a weak laugh, one that cracked halfway through. "Clarity? You've basically decided I'm a criminal." I leaned forward, my voice soft but firm. "No one said that. You didn't have to," she snapped, her tone trembling. "Everything in this room is designed to humiliate me." Her words hit me like a small strike to the chest, sharp, quick, saddening. I didn't flinch, but I felt something inside me wilt a little. "I never wanted you humiliated," I whispered. "I wanted you honest." She scoffed and turned her face away, but I saw the shimmer in her eyes. The emotions she tried so hard to bury were starting to spill out. Her breath hiccuped once, an uncontrolled little sound she couldn't hide. The lawyer uncurled another paper from the file, spreading it out on the desk. "There's one more matter we need to address before we close this meeting." Her head jerked up. "What now?" His tone stayed steady. "Restoration of full authority requires acknowledgement." "Acknowledgement?" She frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It simply means," he explained, "that you must confirm verbally that you understand these documents override the one you presented." Her eyes widened. Panic flickered across her face like a quick flame. "You want me to just say I was wrong?" He didn't respond with accusation or sharpness, just calm truth. "This is a legal requirement." My daughter's breath grew uneven. "I can't say that." I exhaled slowly. "Why not?" Her voice cracked. "Because it makes me look like a liar." I touched my fingertips together, pressing gently as a faint awe escaped me, not from pain, but from the long, stretching tension swirling in this tiny room. You forged my signature, sweetheart, I whispered. The moment you did that, you looked like one. She covered her face with her hands, letting out a muffled groan, low and trembling. Her shoulders shook once, then stilled. The lawyer spoke quietly. This acknowledgement doesn't accuse you of anything. It simply recognizes that the original documents are valid. She looked up slowly, her eyes red, her voice hoarse. But it feels like betrayal. I tilted my head. Which part? She swallowed hard. You choosing paperwork over me. My heart squeezed. No, I said softly. I'm choosing boundaries. There's a difference. She blinked, almost stunned. There's a reason, I continued, why I locked those documents in a safe. Because I knew life brings moments like this, moments when love and power get tangled together. Her mouth quivered. I wasn't trying to take power. I let out a soft, almost breathy the kind that slips out when you see something clearly for the first time. You were trying to control me, baby. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but that doesn't mean it didn't. She lowered her gaze. For the first time that afternoon, she didn't argue. The lawyer folded his hands. Would you like a moment before you respond? She shook her head slowly. No, let's just get it over with. He nodded respectfully. Very well, please state that you understand the original documents are the active legal records. Her throat tightened visibly. She closed her eyes, taking a long, shaky inhale. When she spoke, her voice trembled. I understand the original documents are the legal ones. Her words hung in the air, fragile, thin, but heavier than anything else said so far. The lawyer gave a steady nod and wrote a note. Thank you, that's all we needed. My daughter let out a long, broken sigh as though a weight lifted from her shoulders and crashed onto the floor instead. I waited until the pen stopped scratching the paper, then spoke gently. Look at me for a moment. She hesitated. Then slowly, painfully, she lifted her eyes to mine. What you did hurt me, I said, allowing the truth to sit plainly between us. It shook something inside me I didn't expect to feel from my own child. She flinched, tears gathering again. But I continued, my voice softening. I don't want this moment to be the one that defines us. I want it to be the one that wakes us up. She stared at me, caught off guard. Wakes us up? Yes, I said, to what we're becoming. To what we need to fix, to what we can still save. Her chin trembled and a small, faint awe drifted from her lips, uncontrolled, raw, full of the child she used to be. For the first time during this whole meeting, she didn't push back. She didn't argue, she just listened. The lawyer closed the folder and placed it neatly inside the safe again. There's nothing more for today, he said. You're both welcome to take your time here. He stepped back respectfully, giving us space. I reached across the table and placed my hand near hers, not touching, not forcing, just close enough to let her choose. She stared at it. Then slowly, carefully, she rested her hand on top of mine. A warm, trembling touch. A fragile beginning, a sign that maybe, just maybe, there was still a way forward even if the path ahead had cracks in it. I squeezed her fingers gently. We're gonna talk, I whispered. Truly talk, but not in anger, not in fear. When we walk out of this room, we're starting over. She nodded, her silent little hymn carrying more truth than anything she'd said all day. And for the first time since the safe opened, hope didn't feel so far away. I stood there in that quiet conference room, my fingers resting softly on the edge of the table as the last of the papers settled. It felt like the air itself had changed, like something heavy had been lifted from my chest, even though the ache still lingered. Mercy hesitated across from me, her shoulders shaking ever so slightly, and for just a moment, I didn't see the grown woman who just tried to steal everything I'd ever worked for. I saw the little girl who used to tug on my apron asking for one more pancake. Mom, she whispered, her voice almost too low to hear. I didn't answer right away. My heart was tired, Lord, it was tired. And when you reach my age, 72 years full of mistakes and lessons, you learn not to rush the moments that hurt the most. Because somewhere in that pain, there's truth trying to speak. I pulled out a chair and slowly sat down, letting the room settle with me. Mercy, I said gently. Why? She covered her eyes and shook her head like she still wanted to deny it. But there was no ground left to hide on, not after the forged signatures, not after the lies, not after watching her look me dead in the face and tell me she'd already taken care of everything that wasn't hers. You don't understand, she whispered. You never trusted me to handle anything. A small, sad smile tugged at my mouth. Baby, trust ain't something you demand, it's something you prove. She winced like the words cut her. Maybe they did. Maybe they needed to. I leaned back, staring at the window, watching the late-day sun stretch long shadows across the floor. You could have talked to me, I said softly. Instead, you tried to take everything behind my back. The room was silent. Only the soft ticking of that wall clock kept us company. I was scared, she finally said. Scared you were gonna leave everything to the boys, scared I was gonna get nothing. Everyone keeps telling me I'm the difficult one, that I don't deserve anything, I couldn't take it anymore. I blinked slowly. Baby, you ain't never had to compete with your brothers, not once. You were my first girl, the one I prayed for. Her chin trembled, but she still kept her eyes dipped toward the floor. Then why didn't you tell me that? I thought it was obvious. She let out a brittle laugh. Nothing ever feels obvious when you've felt second your whole life. That hit me deep, deep enough that I felt the sting in the back of my eyes. Maybe she wasn't right, maybe she wasn't fair, but she was hurting, and no amount of forged papers could erase the fact that she was still my child. Mercy, I don't know where that came from, I said. But if you told me you felt that way, I would have listened. She swallowed hard. I didn't want to look weak. I nodded slowly. And look where trying to look strong got you. She sobbed then quietly, like her shame was heavier than her fear. Her elbows rested on her knees as she covered her face, shaking. I let her cry, not because she deserved comfort in that moment, but because I needed to breathe. I needed to remember that motherhood don't end when your children disappoint you. It stretches, breaks, heals, and stretches again. After a moment, I finally spoke. Mercy, what you did was wrong, deeply wrong, and it hurt me in a way I don't have words for. Her sobs quieted. But I ain't gonna throw you away. Her head snapped up, eyes red and swollen. You're not? No, I whispered. But forgiveness ain't the same thing as forgetting, and it ain't the same thing as trust. Her tears spilled over again, but this time with something softer, like she'd expected the worst and didn't know what to do with Mercy being handed back to her. The lawyer stepped forward then, clearing his throat gently. Mrs. Nelson, would you like me to finalize the reinstatement of the original documents? I nodded. Yes, keep everything as it was. And add one more thing for me. He took out a pen, ready. I want a clause, I said, stating that no changes to the estate can be made without me present. No signatures, no transfers, no adjustments. Mercy stiffened like the words stung. But she didn't argue. The lawyer wrote everything down, his pen scratching softly against the paper. When he finished, he looked at both of us. I'll prepare the final copies within the hour. Thank you, I said. As he stepped out, the room felt too quiet again. Mercy stared at the table, her hands twisting nervously. Mom, I don't expect you to trust me again, not now, maybe not ever, I sighed. I can love you without trusting you, she flinched. I felt that too. But trust can grow again, I added. If you grow. Her shoulders sagged like someone finally turned down the volume of her pride. I want to try. I really do. For the first time, I believed her just a little, but little was enough. I picked up my purse and stood. My legs felt heavy, but my spirit felt steady. Come on, I said softly. Walk me to the car? She blinked in surprise, then quietly nodded. We walked down the hallway together, not speaking, not touching, just walking. The kind of walk two people take when they're trying to glue something broken back together. When we stepped outside, the light breeze brushed across my face. Mercy stood beside me, breathing slow, like she was afraid to break whatever fragile peace had formed between us. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't the villain of the story in that moment, just a flawed woman who'd made a desperate, selfish choice. I know, I said, and I did. I reached out and touched her arm lightly, not a full embrace. Not a forgiveness hug, just a touch, a signal. We'll take it one day at a time, I said. Her eyes brightened with a small, shaky hope. Okay. I opened my car door, but before I stepped inside, I added, and Mercy, don't ever try to take from me again. Her nod was quick and honest. I won't. I believed that too, just enough. I drove off with the sun dipping low behind me, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I didn't feel powerless. I felt restored, rooted, and ready to finish this story the right way. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. I lay there in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, letting the silence settle over me like a blanket I wasn't sure I wanted. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mercy's face again, first the pride, then the fear, then that wide-open hurt when the truth came out. I'd lived long enough to understand that betrayal ain't always born from hatred. Sometimes it crawls out of insecurity, the kind that eats a person alive until it swallows their good sense whole. But knowing that didn't make the wound any smaller. Around 5 in the morning, before the sun could even think about rising, I finally swung my legs out of bed and stood up. My bones complained as usual, but my spirit felt lighter than it had in weeks. Maybe because the truth was finally back where it belonged, in the open, exposed, no shadows left for lies to hide in. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching the steam curl into the air. Lord, the memories that rolled through that room, birthday cakes, school projects, family dinners, and arguments we wished we could take back. And now here I was, 72 years old, sipping coffee at dawn like I was waiting for some kind of verdict on my motherhood. But there ain't no judge for that, just the quiet and your own heart talking to you. By the time the sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky with that soft peach glow, I'd already made up my mind. There were still loose ends to tie, conversations to finish, and choices to make, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Age doesn't always make you wise, but pain sure will. Later that afternoon, I drove back to the lawyer's office. The papers were ready, clean, clear, protected, and notarized. My original estate plans were locked in place again with safeguards that no one, not even my daughter, could twist around. The lawyer walked me through everything one more time. With these measures, he said, tapping the documents gently, your estate can't be altered without your presence and confirmed signature. No one can impersonate you. No one can act on your behalf without verified authorization. I nodded slowly. Good, that's how it should have been from the start. He hesitated. Are you sure you don't want to file charges? Forgery is a serious offense. My heart clenched at the suggestion. I could almost hear Mercy crying yesterday, see her shoulders shaking with all that shame she tried to bury. No, I said, firm but gentle. She needs guidance, not prison. He accepted that with a small nod, and I appreciated it. Some folks don't understand that mercy and accountability can stand side by side without either one losing strength. When I stepped outside the building, Mercy was sitting on a bench near the parking lot, hands clasped in her lap, eyes lowered. The sight softened something in me I didn't know was still flexible. She stood when she saw me. I didn't know if you wanted me here. I didn't ask you to come, I said truthfully, but I don't mind that you're here. She nodded, swallowing her nerves. I want to do better, Mama, and I want you to, I replied. But wanting ain't enough on its own, you're gonna have to show it. I know. I started walking toward my car and she followed at a quiet pace. When we reached it, she stopped beside me. Mom, what happens now? I ran my fingers along the door handle, feeling the cool metal against my skin. Now, I said softly, now we take the long road, the slow road, the honest road. You'll rebuild trust with action, not words. She blinked, tears away. I'll do whatever it takes. I gave her a small nod, not an embrace, not a promise, just a signal that the door wasn't closed. Then start today, she hesitated. What do you need from me? I looked her in the eye, letting her see the truth without dressing it up. Respect, her breath hitched. Okay, and patience, I added. Because healing ain't a race. Okay, she whispered again. And Mercy, I need you to understand something. I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. I love you, that never changed. But love doesn't mean ignoring the truth, and it doesn't mean handing you things you haven't earned. She nodded firmly this time, as if the words settled in a place where she'd actually keep them safe. I get it. Good, I said. We stood there a moment, the afternoon breeze brushing past us, the world moving on like it always does. And in that stillness, I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single moment, but a slow, steady unfolding, one step at a time, one boundary at a time, one truth at a time. That night, after I got home, I sat on my porch watching the sky fade into that deep, comforting navy blue. Fireflies danced in the yard like the world was celebrating something small but meaningful. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and rocked gently back and forth, letting the rhythm calm me. You reach a certain age where you stop running from broken things. Instead, you learn how to hold them gently, examine them, repair what you can, and release what you can't. And maybe that's what this whole ordeal taught me, how to stand in my own worth without letting bitterness take root. For a long moment, I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to God, to my own strength, to the truth that finally came into the light. Then I opened my eyes and smiled. Because this chapter wasn't about losing a daughter. It was about reclaiming myself. A woman who raised her children with every ounce of love she had. A woman who refused to be tricked, silenced, or overlooked. A woman who found her voice again even in the face of betrayal. And as the night settled in around me, warm and familiar, I knew one simple truth with absolute certainty: I wasn't powerless. I was still here, still standing, still strong. And this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of me choosing myself, loud, clear, and unshakable. Before you head out, sugar, I just want to say this: if you've been sitting here listening all the way to the end, I'd love to know something personal from you. Which city are you watching from? Go on and tell me down in the comments. It always warms my heart to see folks from all over the world gathering around this little porch of mine, sharing stories like family. And if this one touched something deep inside you, maybe reminded you of your own strength or your own battles or even your own healing, then don't be shy about tapping that like button. It helps more people find these stories, more folks who might need a little comfort the way you did today. Drop your thoughts, your reflections, or even just a small "I'm here" in the comments. I read every single one, and every word you write feels like another hand reaching out, reminding me these stories matter. If you've got a friend, a sister, or someone walking through their own pain or family trouble, send this story their way. And sugar, if you haven't already, go on and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter we take together. There's always another story brewing, another lesson wrapped in love, another quiet moment waiting for us to sit down and breathe through it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.